Welcome to another weekly Blue Room show with me, Dave Downey, Peter McFarlane here. And I'm delighted to say a good friend of mine who we don't do many podcasts with these days, or we used to do loads. Shai Magnus here. Shai, how are you, mate?
Good, thanks, Dave. I wish it was in better circumstances, but I'm sure we'll get onto that.
Well, do you know what? I had the theory that we'd be doing one again because obviously we're both busy people with different things that we do. I had a feeling that the next time we'd be doing a positive podcast when we're in a cup final or cup semis coming up to April, or even battling for the Champions League position. But no, we're battling to stay in the Premier League here, mate, aren't we? So, like you say, you wish it was better circumstances that we were having a chat with, but there's still plenty of things for us to be covering today. Not least starting with what happened at Nottingham Forest. Pete, I'll come to you first on this, mate. And in the post match that we did, which you can still listen to from Sunday, I think the frustration there, certainly from my point of view, I was fuming with us only taking a point from Forest, having led the game twice. A lot of people obviously been discussing the penalty we probably should have had with Seamus getting snapped by Colback, which will give us another penalty for Gray, who emphatically scored the first one. Um, did you feel that that was a lot better than what we'd seen? Because I'm torn in between, like, yeah, it's okay if it's better, the performance is better, and we're getting better on the dice. But now I'm starting to feel with how many games left? 12 games we've got left.
Mm.
I'm starting to feel that this is getting too little, too late. What do you feel?
I mean, to be honest, Dave, it's hard not to feel that that the change should have been made sooner. Even though
Yeah,
I was one of the people who was sort of advocating for trying to give Lampard time, but I think that was out of pure blind loyalty and just the desperation of wanting a manager to stay in the job for longer than 12 months. And I think, yeah, if the change would have been made after those two defeats to Bournemouth before the World Cup break, I think that we'd be in a totally different position now. But as it is, we've got to sort of take it game by game now. I'm not giving up hope just yet. I'm really not. And again, it was disappointing to draw that game, given that we were ahead twice. I thought that we looked comfortable, to be honest, in the second half up until the point that they scored the equaliser. I thought there was only one team who was going to win it. And I didn't see a way back for Forest. I just thought that we were managing the game really well, and another individual mistake to give the ball away in a silly position has cost us. So yeah, I mean, overall, I don't think anyone could argue that with the fact that we are playing so much better, but creating more chances, we're looking like a more fluid side. We're looking like a team who were up for a fight. I mean, when you look at Lampard's last 12 games in charge in the league, we picked up 5 points under Sean Dyche. We've picked up 7 in 6 games. So we are seeing market improvements. Obviously, one thing that Sean Dyche has got no control over is the quality within the squad. And when you were talking about in terms of substitutions and things that we weren't able to make until late on in the game. I think when you look at the options that we have, I think Sean Dyche is doing an incredible job to get anything out of these players. So I think when we look back at the end of the season, as long as we stay up, that point against Forest will be a crucial one.
yeah. Shy.
Yeah, I think. I mean, going into the game beforehand, I think I would have took a point. To be honest with you, I think you look to take as many home wins as you can and string as many sort of positive points you can away from home. Obviously, the way you put it, Dave. When you go ahead twice, it is quite a bitter pill to swallow, and it does seem to be at the moment. What are undoing is individual errors and lapses of concentration. I think in the main, we're playing better and we seem to be more structured in our play than we have been under Lampard. And like as Pete says, there's a lack of quality in the squad that Sean Dyche he can't sort of control, and that sort of shows in that this the 88th minute substitutions where the
Yeah.
quality that we're bringing on is not up to standard. You need better off the bench, and that's the best he can do. He can only work with the tools that he's got.
I think looking at the whole picture of the relegation battle and what we've got in front of us, and you know, the next 6 games for us, Southampton, Bournemouth, and Leeds, it were probably the you know, 3 out of the 4 more likely, 3 out of the other teams around us more likely to be scrapping coming towards the very end of the season. I do think that the next 6 games, I think we've got the better opportunities really to get points on the board, and yeah, I think ideally, we should have been making that decision to replace Lampard back at the after the Bournemouth results, but we are where we are. We've got to go forward. The last couple of games haven't been awful. Obviously, some disappointing results and some more disappointing than others, but there are positives in there as well. And I think ultimately, when you look at it at the end of the season, I think the Forest point has to be looked at in a positive, because we are making small changes, and to go to ahead twice in the game. It would have been unthinkable away from home, a couple of weeks ago. So to do that now and it is a positive step. It's just these fine margins and these lapses of concentration that are really we're coming unstuck on.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, to be honest with you. But I mentioned to you at the start there about, you get that sense of inevitability, and I've often been criticised as being quite a negative fan at Everton, to say the very least. But I look at those games we've got left. The thing that bothers me most when I look at that league table, and obviously I'm quite always someone who looks at the negative side of things, like I've just said then. But when you look at that league table there, obviously we're still in the bottom 3, haven't played a game more than everybody else. You got Southampton, Bournemouth behind. I tell you what, where I was shitting myself the most was when when Bournemouth were leading 2-0 at Arsenal. That I was looking at it and thinking could end up in the bottom of the league here. Southampton had that win against Leicester as well. You see a lot of people who are like more neutral to this, looking at the bottom half of the table, saying, well, you've got probably 12th downwards that are in this, because we're 5 points off 12th. And I know a lot of people stereotypically, the more positive form of thinking about this, people will be thinking, well, we're only 5 points behind 12th there, but figure into that the way we played against Forest. The thing you look at if you're staying in the Premier League is one side of the pitch, one end of the pitch has got to be something that improves drastically. I don't know what Dyche is doing here, and this might get a few people jumping in at me when I say this, but how Michael Keane's got back into the side there, and I know he's got a history with him. I know he played with him, played under him at Burnley. When I look at that and think of in those last couple of games, he's cost us. I mean, you've got Mina on the bench there. You've even got Holgate there, who a lot of people aren't fans of. I look at that and I think I'd probably have, well, at least Mina ahead of him, but even look at Holgate himself, and Cody, who's been out because of his form, obviously. You first, Pete. Do you think that's going to cost us, or feel like it has cost us so far? Because honestly, I looked at both of the goals the Forest scored. The first one, certainly, he did almost the identical thing that he did against Saka, against that 4-0 defeat to Arsenal the other night, where he just leaves a massive gap in between him and the left back, which was Godfrey, obviously not a natural left back. And then the second one, him and Tarkowski are both guilty for not just trying to throw themselves at that shot that Johnson has that scores the equaliser to them.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, if Yerry Mina was reliable and if he was 100% fit, I think Yerry Mina walks into our side. And I don't think any manager would hesitate in putting Yerry Mina in from the start for Everton. Certainly, it's not just the fact that he's obviously a strong defender. He's also the type of defender who'll get in the heads of the opposition players. He's also a threat from set pieces. I think Yerry Mina is, when he's on form and when he's fully fit, I think he's a quality centre half. But unfortunately, you just can't rely on him. And I think Dyche is probably looking at it from a sense of he needs to have someone who is able to give us that consistency from now till the end of the season. Someone who's not going to be picking up silly injuries and costing him a substitution, if you like. Again, Mason Holgate has been in and out of the side this season through injury and through loss of form and through basically falling out of favour. But Dyche he's played him, he's brought him on in that sort of defensive midfield role a couple of times now, hasn't he? So maybe he sees him as an option there. I think with Michael Keane and James Tarkowski, I think it does just go back to the purely down to the fact that Dyche is familiar with them and he's familiar with what he can get out of them. But again, it's those individual errors and those lapses in concentration. It's something that he really needs to get a grip of. It's not just the players at the back. Ghana Gueye has had numerous chances this season, numerous occasions this season where he's given goals away and he's given the ball away in really bad positions. He's another player. I think the fact that he got hauled off at half-time against Arsenal said it all. I don't think Dyche was happy with him whatsoever. But it's those small margins and those silly errors that we need to cut out. But in terms of Michael Keane, as I say, I just think it's purely down to Dyche being familiar with him, knowing what qualities he does have. I mean, the other thing as well to bear in mind is that when he left Burnley, Michael Keane was probably in the best form of his life. So the Michael Keane that Sean Dyche knows is a reliable centre half. Whereas he's obviously had a number of years at Everton now. We know that he suffered with his confidence, and he, well publicised that he's had mental health issues in terms of he was feeling the strain of and the pressure of being at Everton Football Club. Maybe Sean Dyche just thinks that if he can get him playing regularly again, he can get him back to that standard that meant that we forked out 25-30 million pounds for him.
It's scary side. I mean, we've had him 7 years now. 2016, we got him. It's mad thinking that he's been with us for 7 years and seeing him back playing. Obviously, it's regardless of what you think of him, it's good to see him back in the squad. In regards to what people are saying there about the mental health situation he's had and injuries and whatnot, and his lack of form. But I mean, given the situation we're in there, is that a bit of a gamble? Do you think by Dyche? Like I said, because against Forest there, we had Cody and Mina sitting there on the bench, Holgate as well, who obviously wouldn't be, I think he'd be out of those three I'm mentioning there, he'd be the last of those to be coming on, certainly at centre-back anyway. Maybe he does a job at a full-back position that we needed, like Godfrey did when he started against Forest. But it doesn't fill you with, well, I'm putting words into your mouth here, you tell me what you think, but it doesn't put any confidence in my mind when we're starting with him at centre-back.
No, and it is absolutely a massive gamble. You can't take gambles on confidence players when you're in a relegation battle because the pressure's so much on. And I do feel for Michael Keane, if he's going through whatever he's going through, and it's often overlooked, isn't it? That the pressures of a Premier League player. A lot of people will look at the price tag and assume that with a big price tag with good form comes a strong mental attitude, and it's not the case. They're all everyone's as fallible as each other, and some more so than others. And but it's almost like out of the frying pan into the fire. The problem we had last year was our sort of centre halves, Keane, Mina, Holgate in particular, were appalling, and they were all as bad as each other. Mina probably less so, but I mean, my heart's in my mouth every time Mina has the ball at his foot. There's always a mistake with Yerry Mina, and that's why I'm really loath to to say I'll give him a go. I'd much rather see even a loss of form of Conor Cody and James Tarkowski in that mix, purely because I'm old school football fan. I want to see the yard dogs in there, kicking lumps out to people and putting the ball into Rose Ed rather than tippy tappy from the back out. And if Michael Keane's on the road to recovery in terms of his mental health and once we need to get him back playing football, it's really it's easier said than done, but you need to have him in the pre-season and building up his confidence from there. Not coming in in the middle of a sort of a relegation dogfight where we are a defensive team and a lot of our focus is on in at the back, and it just puts pressure on him, and it's I wonder if it is the right decision to make.
Yeah, I mean, it's a debate we could crack on with for the remainder of the season. Really, what the horses for courses he puts in and whatnot. But I can't help but feel there, Pete, with that Cody situation where I think he's featured, he's played every game since we got him in. obviously on loan to the end of the season from Wolves. But the reason why he's being put out is an interesting one for me, because it seems blatantly obvious the reason why he was dropped was because of the second goal that Aston Villa scored a couple of weeks ago, where Buendia just simply just shimmies past him, doesn't he, and throws it past Pickford like he isn't even there. I can imagine when Dice is watching that, he's pulling, well, if he did have any air left, he'd be pulling it out. Watching that and that sort of situation. To then throw Keane in, obviously he's taking confidence in, like I was saying, in it, and a player that has had his own issues, but he's probably thinking that he's the right person to get the best out of him, like he did when he was at Burnley, like he did to basically create him into a player that we paid 20 odd million for like 7 years ago. But I'm wondering on the other side of things as well up front, the one dominant bit of confidence that I got from that game against Forest was obviously us managing to score 2 goals, which is a rarity, isn't it, this season? But also the fact that he decided to put Damari Gray up front, and how it worked, because I didn't watch that game and think at the start I thought, okay, take Mopé out, which was, let's call a spade. I was delighted that he wasn't playing in that first 11, because I think he's been dreadful since we signed him, and the amount of money we paid for, that's a different argument. That's made me feel a bit sick, to be honest, when we did that. But when you look at that, he's made that change. He's put Gray in there, obviously been working on it in training, because he wouldn't just throw him in willy-nilly, would he? When he goes in there, I think the immediate concern everybody's got is, well, if we're trying to play like Route 1, long balls, if we had Calvert-Lewin in there, even ridiculously, we've seen it when Mopé has started, that we're trying to play long balls to a 5'7" striker, it doesn't work. I was fearing the same thing when I saw Gray up there, at the same time as being confident that he's giving it a go. But it did feel it was a little bit more pragmatic the way we played, Pete, didn't it? When it wasn't always Route 1, it wasn't always looking for him to flick it onto anybody or somebody else flick it onto him. Dare to say it, there was a little bit more football on the deck that got the ball through to him, that made him effective, wasn't there?
Absolutely, and I think one thing with Damari Gray is that he's very comfortable in getting the ball with a defender on his back. He's always, that's one of his main attributes for me, and also his pace. So I think it was an obvious choice for me to throw Damari Gray into that sort of lone striker role, not least because he just offers you a bit of an outlet. As I say, if you are under pressure and you need to hit the channels, he can use it. He can use that pace to get himself into good positions and hold the ball up and wait for for support from the midfielders. But yeah, I was delighted to see Damari Gray start in that position the other day. Again, so, some of the criticism for Damari Gray sometimes is that he can dwell on the ball a bit too much. He can sort of, sometimes his final ball isn't up to scratch. These are criticisms which I think that have been fairly put towards him, to be fair. But playing him in a more central role, it kind of takes away a lot of those issues. His role will be primarily to get himself into good positions to score goals rather than having to create. And let's be honest, Dave, when you look at the quality or lack of quality in this squad, Damari Gray is probably one of the players who you'd say can actually, has got the technique to be able to finish a chance. I think I was saying to you, the last time about after the Aston Villa game, something that really struck me. It was just before half time. We had a free kick on the edge of the area, left on the edge of the area, and we didn't have a single right-footed player. I looked around and I thought, who's going to take this now? And Dwight McNeil ended up taking the free kick
with his left foot.
We did with his left foot. When it was like the same position that Ward Prowse had for Southampton. We ended up having to rely on a left-footed player to take a free kick, which was absolutely tailor-made for a right-footed player. And I looked around and thought, there's no one here who could actually, there's no right-footed player in this side who could take that free kick. But actually, Damari Gray would be that player if he was on the pitch. So I'm delighted to see him back in that starting berth, certainly in that central role. I think that could be a position that he could excel at. And there's not, again, we're still unsure as to when Dominic Calvert-Lewin will be back. We're hoping it's not too much longer. But again, we're just kind of going off little leaks and little bits of information. We haven't really been told anything officially in terms of what's actually been up with him. We're just sort of waiting for the day that he's suddenly announced in the squad. But in the meantime, I think Damari Gray can certainly offer us a hell of a lot more than the likes of Neil Maupay, who for me, like you say, has been underwhelming, and that's being really generous.
Yeah, it is. And so would you stick with Gray if Calvert-Lewin can't come back? Let's just predict that he's not in for the rest of the season. I think he obviously will be, and he'll come back in the next point in a few weeks. But like Pete's saying there, we're never told when that's going to be, for whatever reason that is. Would you stick with just putting Gray up there? Simple as that, from now till the end of the season, and hope he's the one that, because it seems to me, and I don't want to just go off one game and sort of like just immediately think that's that with putting Gray into start, but then you look at the rest of the squad. There's nothing else really that can go along, like we were saying there about Maupay. There's nobody else really you can throw in there apart from Ellis Sims, who I felt a bit sorry for him when I've seen him play, because he's coming into a side that's completely on its arse as opposed to what he did, which was a decent job when he was at Sunderland earlier this season. Do you stick with Gray?
I think you've got to within reason. I mean, I find it utterly bizarre that he got dropped in the first place. To be honest, when Dyche came in, and he had in the midfield, obviously he had Dwight McNeil and Iwobi on the wings, where Gray seemed to be playing a bit. I think in the previous games, up until obviously Lampard got sacked, Gray was probably our best player, most creative outlet, our most dangerous. And I don't have the figures in front of us, but probably one of our leading scorers, which isn't saying much. But I think he's got 2.
I think he was with 3.
Yeah, mad. But obviously within reason. And I say by within reason, if he starts thinking that the house out, then obviously you've got to make it. You can't stick with a broken cog. You've got to make a change. But you'd like to see that he's certainly got more about him, and he puts himself about a lot more, and he's got more of a threat in front of goal than Neil Maupay, and hopefully toward as we're going through the season, as we're getting Ellis Sims up to speed, it was a baptism of fire for him coming into the situation that we're in, and I think was it Liverpool as sort of a substitution appearance, and he didn't really do anything, did he? And you want to see him get up to speed, and then maybe because if you've got a target man up front, which Ellis Sims obviously offers a bit more in it physicality than what we've got, then that might bring someone like Neil Maupay into it a little bit more, where he's obviously a bit more of a diminutive player. Being the lone striker up front clearly doesn't suit him, but having that physicality to mix it with big robust centre halves, playing off someone who can mix it up and lay off the ball it certainly offers something different. But up until we've got that ability to be able to deploy Sims like that, or anyone else, then you've got to go with your threat, and that's Demarai Gray. And I'm not like an advocate of playing of square pegs and round holes, and I don't think that Demarai Gray is a centre forward by any stretch of the imagination, but needs must at this stage, and like I say, he's our biggest threat going forward. And if we're not getting it from Maupay, if we're not getting it from Sims for whatever reason, then you've got to go with him.
This this situation we have, obviously, so much of everything that goes wrong this season, even under Dyche since he's came in, makes you look back towards, regrettably, the January window where we did absolutely nothing. And ever since then, that's always been the asterisk that comes in with anything I think about with this football club at the moment, and anything that we talk about on all of our podcasts with the Blue Room is, that regret is it's going to bite us in the arse, I think, permanently. And that's not me trying to, always be negative in regards to my opinion on things. But when we're talking, which we have extensively so far, about options that we've got, or lack of options that we've got in terms of scoring goals, defensively, players in and out of form, players in or out of fitness. You're throwing Godfrey at left back because Michalenko's injured now. A lot of people would say we'll put him in anyway because Michalenko hasn't been any good. There are a lot of issues there that you look at and you can look back to and relate to what happened in January. I'll get both of your personal thoughts towards what happens towards the end of this, because I think I seem to be asking this at the end of every pod after every game that we've played. But one of the big stories that's come to fruition in the last couple of days has been about Moise Kean, and we found out, not through Everton telling us, surprisingly, but he's completed his move to Juventus. Obviously, he was there for a 2-year loan, but it turns out that Juventus have permanently signed him. So obviously he's not coming back to Everton, which I don't think is any shame to many people, even though we'd probably be getting a game right now, ironically, wouldn't he? But you look at the situation and you think, well, there's a load of money in the coffers there. We've got the Anthony Gordon money, 45 million quid that we got from Newcastle just 6 weeks ago. It turns out now, Peter, and again, I'm going to use that word, ironic, that we've got around, what, £70 million there on 2 players that we've sold. A lot of other places are reporting that it's a little bit more from the initial fee that Juventus have paid to actually get the loan from us. So in terms of business, if you took away anything you think about Everton, that's actually a really good deal for a player that's done pretty much nothing for us. But how frustrating is it that we're sitting there now looking at a team that desperately needs a striker? We've got 70 million in the bank and we can't do one thing about it until we find out our fate of whether we're still in the Premier League or being relegated to the Championship.
It is ironic, isn't it, that the best bit of business that we've actually done over the past 7 years has randomly, happened in the middle of the March. But yeah, the Moise Kean deal. It's a strange one for me because we all knew that the deal was set in stone. That he would have to sign for Juventus at the end of the season, given a 2-year loan and the deal that was in place. So yeah, it's strange timing. I'm assuming it's probably something to do with Juventus' books and maybe it helps Everton out in terms of financial fair play as well. But I don't know if you can hear my dog going nuts in the background. By the way, I'm going to go down and
does he want Moise Kean back? Does he?
He wants him back. Yeah, he's fuming. Whiskey Blue was a massive Moise Kean fan. Talking about Moise Kean, by the way, this is like a bit off. Like I'm just sort of going with it now. A little bit off subject. Did anyone see that he got sent off after like 8 seconds or something ridiculous the other day?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Yeah, I think Juventus are immediately regretting their decision.
Why? No, tell us what happened then. How did he get sent off in the seconds?
Yeah, so basically he was getting brought on in like the 89th minute to like sort of help see the game out or whatever. It was nearly towards the end of the game anyway. And literally I think the ball gets played sort of towards him. There's a little bit of a tangle of legs. And he gets like a bit of a shove, in the back, and basically just turns around and just volleys just kicks the other player in the leg, who then sort of does this weird thing where he did blatantly volley him in the calf, but he just sort of has like a delayed reaction to it, then crumples to the ground, and then Moise Kean just gets sent off and just walks straight off, and he'd literally been on the pitch for, I don't know, 10 seconds, slightly less time than he was on the pitch when Duncan Ferguson brought him on at Old Trafford. But it was still about as much. He probably did about as much in that sort of 8 seconds. He probably did about as much as he did in that 10 minutes at Old Trafford. But yeah, I personally, I am delighted that we've seen the back of him. I think that, I can understand the reasons that we signed him in the first place. I think he was obviously seen as an up-and-coming player. He was, I think it's fair to say that everyone was excited when we signed him, but it was very obvious very early on that he was just never gonna be an Everton player. He seems to, his heart didn't seem to be in it. He seems to be sort of, it's obviously going to be difficult for any young player to come to a new country, certainly when you don't speak the language. So, I just don't think it was ever going to work out with Moise Kean, to be honest with you. So I'm happy that we've managed to recoup the money that we paid for him. In fact, we've probably made a slight profit. But yeah, it's just bizarre, the timing of it. It would have been nice to have got that money a little bit earlier, and we might have been able to spend some of it. But yeah, it is what it is. Let's hope we can stay up now and hopefully we can reinvest that money properly. Although let's be honest, I can't exactly say that this board have got a good record when it comes to reinvesting money.
Well, yeah, that's the thing as well, Si, isn't it? If you give them that much money to spend, nobody really, because it was Brands who brought him, wasn't it? Kean. I wish it was Kane. Brought Kean in a few years ago when Silva was the manager. It is remarkable that we got that amount of money back from him. But out of players that we've had that have flattered to deceive so many times over the years. When we first got him, I was so excited getting in this young Italian striker that's been. Well, we didn't bang them in exactly for Juve, did he? But he looked like such a talent when you looked at. I know they all do when you look at the YouTube video of any player. I mean, I could look good on YouTube. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But him, and I remember being so excited about him. But we had a little bit of a chat just before we started this sign and getting that money in. Starting to feel a little bit again, like I mentioned about the club and the results that we're getting. Too little, too late.
It is, and I think there's two things at play here, isn't it? That you've got the squad that obviously aren't good enough, trying to string results together to save us, and then you've got the lack of investment, and when it comes to the crunch at the end of the season, if the worst is the worst, and you're looking at responsibility and ownership of the situation, who is to blame, and you can't look past the board and their sort of.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, Si, but I mean, you mentioned that there, and Pete did as well, the board, and obviously we know the situation going on with that, and we're all pretty much on the same wavelength of what the issue is with the board, but in particular, Kevin Thelwell in stuff like this now, given that pretty much nothing was done in the window. This is a guy we meant to have brought in with a brilliant CV, and where have we had this before? Think back to Walsh when we first initially got him, when we got our money from Moshiri. Do you look at Thelwell with any real confidence? Is it anything to do with his fault? Because a lot of people have thrown the blame at him, obviously, because he's the head of recruitment who's meant to be getting players in. But do you feel as if board-wise, there's more of a problem? Like if he was to come out and speak honestly, obviously it's never going to happen, but behind closed doors, if you were to have an honest conversation with him, do you think he'd be saying, well, it's the start of this lot that have hired me. That's why all the issues have come what they are with Everton in the transfer window. Whereas I think a lot of fans, including myself, have said, well, he's, regardless of the Lampard situation and getting dicey in towards the end of a window, that whole thing, he's had a month or 30 odd days, whatever it was, to go and sign some players and didn't do it. Is that, he can't surely say that's because we haven't sorted out the manager?
I mean, the thing is, Dave, with these the directors of football is, and this insistence that we have one. He's not the first, and he's probably not going. If we keep the same board, he's probably not going to be the last. And I'm loath to sort of like lay blame on these individuals when I don't really know what they're there to do. Are they there to
We've never fully been told this, have we? We've never fully been told what these people have come in. We've been told that you get given what their job title is, and you can only assume their position. But how much are their hands tied when they come in? We don't know that at all. The communication's never been there, has it?
Exactly, and you can't say to me that a director of football or a scout or whoever it may be has put forward Neil Maupay as this guy's gonna he's gonna be a striking option and he'll be good enough back in August. You can't say to me that what was the lad that came from Aston Villa last January? Who's which scout's putting him forward? Yeah, it's
to not even play him as well. That just shows you the gap that's going on, doesn't it?
There's a massive disjoint between the people that are running the club, the boardroom, the coaching staff, and the management and the players. It's all like it's all disjointed and it's out of sync, and it's been like that since day one. When you're looking back over like sort of the Moshiri era, and like I try and detach myself and look at it and be a bit logical in the way that I approach it. And I think, okay, do you know what? Yes, what he said, I think in one of his last statements, he said, I've backed the managers. Yes, yeah, he has. You can't sort of criticize him for not backing the managers, but can you? When you're in that position where we're buying a million number 10s, you know, a number of years ago when we've got Klassen and Rooney and Sigurdsson, you know, and all these coming into a system where we only need one, and you know, it's such a bizarre situation, and there's no sort of like there's no, for want of a better word, that we always criticise Liverpool for having that transfer sort of council that they had, or whatever you ever want to call it,
yeah.
committee. That's it. There doesn't seem to be any, you know, it seems to be like the director of football is bringing in, you know, the players that they want, the manager's bringing in the players that they want, the owners bringing in the players that they want, and you're like, how is that conducive to a football club that wants to move forward and be successful, when you've all got these like three or four individuals that are all sort of like pulling in separate directions. They're not even on you know, on the same sort of plane going to the destination. They're all over the place, and that's ultimately that's what's causing us problems on the pitch, because you've got these players that don't fit in to the director of football sort of view on how he wants us to play on the pitch, or whatever, if that's even his sort of remit. Then you've got, you know, players that the manager has to, well, you know, none of these players, you know, are his players because he came in at the end of the window. And then you've got, you know, these, you know, some of the players that you know, the owners made the decision on, and it's just that's not how successful football clubs work.
Yes, the Moshiri issue obviously has been covered so much this season, and how frustrated and angry the club is towards them, protests and whatnot. You can't blame anybody for feeling that way towards him. I think it's been a little bit clouded in terms of the rest of the board when we've had bloody headlocks and nonsense like that going on, and way in which the board is. Ken Wright's still there, and you know, work you've done, work we've both done in the past about why this football club needs changing. When Moshiri came in, obviously we were all really optimistic because we were spending all sorts of money on players who all turned out to be crap, or 99% of them did anyway. Managers as well seemed to change, and things have been decent. The one that we got actually just decided to get off himself and go back to Real Madrid. Don't blame him for doing that, do we?
No.
The situation with Moshiri that we saw this season, the interview in inverted commas that he did with FAB, and now, you know, you look at this, the current issue that we're in, and what you've just been talking about then. Does it surprise you? Because it doesn't to me, and I've thought about this so many times and spoken about it so many times with Moshiri, that how can a man who's so efficient in regards to the financial power that he has, and how much money that he has, and how much money that he's earned, it makes you think that he was just given it by somebody as a bit of a favour, or, you know, it was given as a birthday present, just a few billion quid, because he's that incompetent at what he does.
Yeah, the thing is, Dave, like he may be, you know, a brilliant accountant, a genius in his field, but when it comes to running a football club, it's okay to say, you know, I don't have a grip on this situation. I don't really understand the ins and outs, despite being involved in, you know, before Everton, Arsenal for a long time. But you know, it's different being, you know, being a shareholder in a football club, to actually running a football club. And I guess, like, I don't know, obviously I don't know Farhad Moshiri, but it to me it stinks a little bit of ego if you know, if he's sat there and he can't see that actually he's contributing as well, to the mess that we're in. What I think personally he should be doing, and you know, this goes for any sort of person who doesn't fully understand, you know, you know, any owner, I suppose, they should essentially employ someone to run the club and take a step back and only be involved when you know, at the very, 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 you know, dire straits. You know, it's difficult, isn't it, to, you know, when you're dealing with someone's own personal wealth, they want to have that involvement, but you know, it is hard, and like I don't know what, other than him, you know, taking that step back and passing the reins off to someone else and just saying, listen, go ahead, you run it. I don't know what the answer is. And, you were talking before about, the issues that, about Moshiri compared to like the board issues that we've got. And, this is something that we have had for a long time. And, how he runs the club's almost overshadowed this season by how the board have conducted themselves. And I think this has always been the problem. Obviously my history involvement in fan activism and what we were trying to do over 10 years ago, when people were criticizing us for our approach, and we always tried to take the personalities out of it, but it would be very hard to take Bill Kenwright out of the limelight and go for the business side of things, which is what we were always trying to do. The problem with that was Bill Kenwright always put himself in the limelight. He was always, he was always front and center in the cameras, making it, and he almost made it about himself. And you're seeing that now, last couple of weeks with the way the boards conducted themselves. There's no way that you don't need to be acting the way they're acting, and putting it's almost like they're trying to make themselves martyrs when and at the expense of the fans, and again, it just adds to the how disjointed the club is, and the behavior of the owner, the behavior of the board, all has its knock-on effects to how we perform on the pitch and how we conduct our business. Because it's not just what we see on the pitch, and it's not just what we see in the director's box. All these there's a whole world that we don't get to see behind closed doors between all the other football clubs in Britain, all the other football clubs in Europe, all the other football clubs in the world. And if they're seeing how, if these football clubs are seeing how Everton owner, Everton board are interacting, how they treat the business that they're doing, how they're treating the fan base, that doesn't make us a respected sort of club going forward. And what was it, 12 or 18 months ago, we were being told that other boards were saying, asking how do Everton do it. Couldn't be fair.
That was Bill's quote, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, they probably do ask how Everton do it. How do Everton do it?
So they don't have to do it. They know
exactly.
Not to act.
So we do exactly the opposite, and that's the stark reality of it is how they conduct themselves doesn't have ramifications on just on the pitch. It has larger ramifications, and as ultimately Farhad Moshiri is the owner, and the buck stops at him, and he needs to start making some difficult decisions. But to me, it just seems like when the going's got tough, he's lost interest, and he's sort of like he's took a step back and passed it. He has passed the reins off, but passed it off to the wrong people. People who have been making poor decisions consistently for the last 20 odd years. And the day-to-day running of the football club are going to people who are doing that, people who are vastly unqualified and over promoted, and people that just don't have any business being in the boardroom or running a football club.
Well, I'm going to say something really controversial now, but I just hope people understand what I mean here. I think the situation the club is in right now, the position that we're in, if the bad thing happens, the really poorest thing happens to us and we end up going down, I think the way he's acted as an owner, as having the responsibility of a club that we all put at the top of our hearts in life, that we all live for in Everton, and how passionate we are about our club, take that out of the equation. That fella deserves everything he gets, I think. If obviously we don't want it to happen. Obviously we're Evertonians. Obviously we are desperate for our club to turn around. We stay in the Premier League and things start becoming a lot better. I think it's gone that far down the road with Farhad Moshiri that, first of all, I don't think we're able to be the side that we even remotely want to be, or that he said he wants Everton to be, or he wants Everton to be. The, again, take the stadium out of that equation as well, because he would happily, if you were to ask him about his legacy at Everton, that would be the top of his list, was that he's got us a new stadium. That can, lo and behold, feel like we're in a situation where, well, it doesn't really matter if we go down to the Championship, the new stadium doesn't effectively matter whatsoever, does it? In terms of the lack of crowd. Well, no, let's face it, home wise, we'll still have the crowds, we'll still have the numbers, because we're still all going to turn up and keep our faith with the club itself. That's never going to change. But I look at him and I think, if he loses a certain amount of money, if he loses his reputation of who he is, he deserves that. He absolutely deserves it, because he's done nothing that, in theory, and look, we're not accountants, we're not people who run like billions of pounds worth of financial institutions and whatnot. We don't fully know that, but we know that people who do make that level of financial prowess have some sort of positive effect. They have an impact where they've got rich because they're good at something.
Well,
this fella has not shown one thing, and that's what I mean by take everything away from the club itself, the football, everything he's done to us. He deserves that sort of level of punishment. Do you sort of understand what I mean there?
Yeah, because these issues that we've got at the moment, these haven't been, just come out of the blue over the last couple of weeks or couple of months. These have been boiling under the surface for a while. And maybe if we'd employed someone different than Carlo Ancelotti, at the time that we did, maybe it would have been, we would have got to this point a lot more sooner.
Yeah.
But the thing is like I say, these issues have been bubbling up under the surface for a while. We had the situation last season where we survived by the skin of our teeth. We come out of it, went into the summer, and we said never again. We will never be in this position again. We went and then sold our best player, our leader, who probably
almost single-handedly kept us up.
Absolutely, replaced them with Neil Maupay, and lost our main striker for most of the season. Went into the January transfer, desperate for more recruitment to support the squad, and where are we? Back at the beginning in another relegation dogfight. We're doing it exactly the same. It's Groundhog Day, only with a worse squad, and he deserves everything he gets, because he's not learning from his lessons, and what lesson can he learn? What does it take for him to go, okay, yeah, I've totally lost. I've fucked up. I've lost to here. Is it relegation? I don't know. I don't even think he's bothered.
This is the thing that I want to stress to people listening to this. That do we deserve it as fans? Absolutely not. Does the club deserve it? The actual club itself? No. The fellow that owns it deserves everything he gets in terms of financial failure. The only thing that's really unfortunate for us is if that was to happen, then we'd be in even more danger. The fact that he's attached to this club actually knocks me sick. And look, I'm not just talking about him in particular, because then people would also be saying to us, oh, well, what about Ken Wright? What about everybody else? They're responsible for narrow hits that we had in terms of almost going down in years gone by. You think of when Moyes first came in, that time, when even going back to Howard, when he come in for the third time, where we nearly went down. We're in a position where that, I think most of us would take it right now that we stay up by scoring a goal in the last minute on the last day against, we've got Bournemouth at home, and that keeps us up. Any scenario that keeps Everton in the Premier League is what we take right now. That's how sad things are that it's come to, and it's hard to keep that in mind, given the story just continues, doesn't it? Like you've mentioned there, say about like going back to last season, we stay up by the skin of our teeth. Never again. We're all talking never again. They're talking never. Well, are they talking never again? If they even had a chat about it since last, that they're the things that I still question about these people, for it to be so poorly led. And Pete's back with us now as well. Pete, I was just saying there before you come back, mate, about Moshiri, the situation we're in. Obviously, you can't 100% put it towards him because of the other characters that work with him in the boardroom. But the situation Everton in right now, he deserves it. as the businessman that he is. Obviously, Everton don't, fans don't, but he deserves everything he gets for how incompetent he's been at owning our club.
Yeah. Anything that comes towards Farhad Moshiri now is fully deserved. I think the fans have made themselves perfectly clear. But again, I think it all comes down to basically just pure and utter naivety. And also, I just feel like he's just been sold down the river. I feel like, this the big elephant in the room, Mr. Kenwright, is the one who will have sold Moshiri this story and vision of this football club who only need a little bit of money. Look how great I've been doing for the past 20 years without much money.
Yeah.
I think a lot of David Moyes papered over the cracks for years. He performed miracles under terrible leadership from the top of the club. Fair play to David Moyes. He was able to somehow not only keep us afloat, but get us challenging or at least fighting towards those European places. But yeah, I think what it comes down to with Farhad Moshiri is naivety and just putting all his faith in the wrong person. And I think he's gone too far down now, where it's almost like, because I think he's probably realizing at this stage now that he's been sold a pup, and that he's basically put his faith in the wrong man. And I think
how thick has he got to be there? How naive have you got to be as a person? Unless it's something completely bizarre, as in he owes somebody a lot of money, otherwise he's going to have a bailiff knock at his house. Do you know what I mean? Other than that, and I'm talking real extremes there, given the people that he'll mix with, given that his friend Usmanov, who again, people bizarrely seems to chat on that he's still involved with us, despite the fact that he's got all sorts of sanctions against him due to what happened with Russia last year. But you look at that situation, you think, well, what does it take for this fella to be so poor at what he's done? And it will come to roost. It comes to roost to everybody that does that. We've managed to get, like Sai said, last season, in the years gone by, when we've very nearly gone down. You look at Wimbledon, you look at Coventry. This is, last season was the third one. It looks like right now we're going to get the fourth one coming up. It's starting to look like episodes of Star Wars, isn't it? But the thing with him, you said he'd been sold down the river and stuff like that. I actually disagree with that, Pete, because the way I mean that is, he's got every tool he needs in life, every tool he needs as a billionaire owner of a Premier League football club to completely eradicate all the shit that's been caused in 7 years. He can do that in a pretty short amount of time. He could have done that in a transfer window in January, and people are going to bang on about, the problem we've got financially and FFP and all that stuff. That's not strictly true, is it? You look at what Newcastle went and done and just decided to buy players when their revenue would nowhere near cover the cost of the players that they're allowed to buy and all that stuff. Other clubs found ways around it. Look at Chelsea. It's blatantly obvious that it's there, and the likes of FFP and the British version of that, all that stuff. There are ways around it. I think we've been shown that by a load of clubs in the years gone by, since it's meant to have been a massive issue that stops clubs doing what Chelsea did, doing what City did, doing what effectively Newcastle are doing now. But they're still doing it. So Dave, you can't sit there and tell me that Everton aren't able to buy a certain player until they've sold somebody. Even when you get that far, even when you get to that point, we still went and sold a player for 45 million and not brought in a striker that we desperately needed on the last day of the season. So therefore, you then point your finger at Thelwell. You then point the finger at the recruitment side of things. It's just, you jump down the rabbit hole and it just keeps on going. There's no stop. And I don't want to turn away because people will be screaming it. Well, this is Bill Kenwright's fault. Absolutely. Completely agree. But this fella's come in as the owner, and I don't think he's been any better than him.
Dave, can I just ask, who's telling us that we've got FFP problems?
Exactly. No, this is it. This is exactly right. And I think that it's very easy when you see these things come out on, you're watching Sky Sports News, listening to whatever radio you want to listen to, and they'll start saying, oh, well, they can't sign that player because of revenue, or you're getting experts in like Kevin Maguire, who's brilliant at what he does in the financial side of sport, saying that certain things. But you know, it is like you say there, like you've hinted, it is a bit of a myth when you're still seeing other clubs, like I've just mentioned, then doing what they do.
Yeah, and it's you know, we've been asking that question for a while, haven't we? You know, why can City spend the way they can? Why can Liverpool? Why can
Well,
Chelsea?
another good example of this, Si, is we'll see what happens with the sanctions that potentially are might happen to them. But
Yeah.
even then, they're at a point now where we're seeing all sorts of news about, this needs investigating. They've spent money here when they couldn't. There's all sorts of financial issues going on at Manchester City. We're not going to get any effect. They're not going to get any effect for years down the line. That's going to take year upon year upon year, because they've got a load of legal teams who are able to kick that down the can as long as it takes for it then to come to fruition when it doesn't actually fucking matter.
But if you're playing devil's advocate and you're saying, who's telling us that we've got financial fair play problems? Is it the journalists, and how are they getting the information? Are they getting that information by the same people that told them that Denise Barrett-Baxendale was assaulted by a fan? Is this because then that questions that questions everything, doesn't it? It opens everything up. You've got to question everything that comes out of that, out of the club. But this is the way it's been for so long. And it's interesting that you mentioned, going back quite a few years to Howard Kendall version 3, back in I think 97. And he did, that was sort of Peter Johnson's death throes at the time.
Yeah.
But since 99, when Bill Kenwright came on board, and what exactly has changed in the way the club operates? What is, Peter said before,
the boys, isn't it?
Exactly. Peter said before, David Moyes papering over the cracks. He absolutely did. We got, but since then we've been making bad decisions. We got in Roberto Martinez, who, for the first 12 months was a revelation.
We get the odd season, don't we? The odd season where things like, this looks really good. Everton actually look like a really well-run club, and players are going to want to come to us. But then almost over a week, you can click your fingers and it's gone back to looking like a shithole.
Yeah, and this is it. And all you have to do is look at the appointments of Denise Barrett-Baxendale. You have to look at the appointments of Graham Sharp, and to within the board, without disrespect to any of them in terms of their abilities, but these aren't people. Well, certainly Denise Barrett-Baxendale is chief exec. She's
been the head of a charity.
Yeah, she's not got like solid football credential. Acumen. Exactly. And then Graham Sharp, absolute club legend, which is a little bit sullied now, I think it's fair to say. But what sort of credentials has he got to be able to to be on the board of one of the biggest clubs in the country? These are in isolation, these are appointments where it wouldn't. You wouldn't think too much about them, but when you've put them all together, when you've got someone like Bill Kenwright, who I've obviously criticised quite a bit over the last 10, 15 years or whatever, when you've got someone like Denise Barrett-Baxendale, who's just a lot, the latest on a sort of conveyor belt after Keith Wirnes and Robert Elstone, of the same kind of ilk, that I'd say, and then someone like Graham Sharp coming into that position, there's no experience and there's no quality.
Well, the Sharpie one you've mentioned there, Si, and I'll come back to you in a sec there, Pete, to fill in what we've just said here about that. But the Sharpie thing, what worked for many, many years, that's been brought in to make us all look really, really thick, because they think that all of us collectively as fans of a football club would think, we've got a legend at Everton who are now part of the board. He's somebody who'll save us. He's somebody who all the fans can look at and think, wow, things are going to be getting better because he has the interest of Everton as much as we do. But like you say there, quite rightly, what's Sharpie's CV on finance and as an accountant and as recruitment. I know he worked amongst the academy and stuff like that, and it goes back to a point that I've made many times: the jobs for the boys. I mean, John Ebrell was working there. I think we gave Jeffers a bit of a job, didn't we? Jose Baxter, we give a bit of a job because he's obviously had a troubled few years before that, and you're like, okay, that's a really nice thing to do, that, Bill, but what's that effectively going to do to us actually having any sort of effect as a Premier League football club?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, like you said about Graham Sharp, that is purely, a smoke and mirrors sort of tactic in terms of, in terms of a distraction from everything else that is.
Well, he must be brutal for the punishment as well, Pete.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He must be like, oh, I'll do this, Bill, and obviously there's a financial side of it too if you accept the job. Because he's not from an era where everybody's getting millions upon millions like they are when you're a footballer these days. You don't have to be any good, but the fact that he's in there, just shows you that's a bit of a slap on the face, saying to all of us, oh, like I said to you, it's like looking at somebody that you go to when they've released the new shirt and they have one of the players there signing the shirt for you, and it makes you feel great, or you're doing it for your kids or whatever, or you're doing it for someone's birthday present. Oh, great! I'll get an autograph from him. That's literally what it feels like, the way it's thrown to us, doesn't it?
But again, I feel like that appointment in particular was one which kind of shows the naivety of the people in charge of the football club, because I think, for example, going back to Bill Kenwright, he would have seen Graham Sharp as like, oh, well, he's untouchable amongst Evertonians, because to Bill Kenwright, Graham Sharp is a hero and is his hero. And there are Evertonians out there who Graham Sharp will have been their hero, their idol growing up. There will have been people who, I mean, again, I wasn't around to see, Graham Sharp play, but obviously I appreciate what he did for the football club as a player. But in terms of my personal hero, there's like 3 generations of Evertonians, or 2 generations certainly of Evertonians, who never saw Graham Sharp play. Yeah. So in terms of his influence on a fan base, as I say, I feel like that's almost like the naivety of the board to think that Graham Sharp would be someone who can say whatever he wants to the fan base and will be untouchable. But the fact of the matter is that a massive majority or a massive amount of the fan base will not have seen him play and will not have seen him as their personal idol or hero. So therefore, that's diluted slightly, and that's not to be disrespectful or to in any way, shape, or form sort of besmirch his record as an Everton goal scorer.
He's ultimately decided to do what he's doing. Yeah, I mean that which effectively hasn't really got anything to do with him as being a club legend. I mean, it tarnishes it for so many people because they think, well, oh, it's Bill's job for the boys, and anybody who because by sort of going in association with Bill and the board and Moshiri, who all of us have so many issues against, and for want of a better term, hatred towards these people who've effectively almost destroyed our football club or the way it's going and the trajectory that it's on, that people can't help but have a problem with that. Like I said, I've worked for him for years at Radio City. Had a great laugh with him, and I'd see him like a couple of times a day when we were doing shows and whatnot. There would be no issue with him joining Everton. He was an Everton legend. He's been an Everton legend to me for those them reasons that I consider him as a friend. But when you go and step into across the picket line, effectively, isn't it what he's gone and done?
Mm.
So I mean, I think that he's
chosen the wrong side. He's chosen the wrong side.
Well, and it's an example.
At a time, he could have stepped down and really made a statement there. And he picked his side, and I think unfortunately there's no coming back from that now. I think especially it was in the follow up in the days after that thing about the headlock, and it was the fact that he doubled down on what had been said in that about that thing about because when he was talking about Denise Barrow-Baxendale, and he basically was talking about the process going overboard and all this sort of thing, and I just think that I think that it was thought, it was considered, and it was assumed that once Graham Sharp spoke, Evertonians would just fall into line again, and we'd be like, oh well, it's all right, Sharpie's spoken now, and so we'll do as we're told. Whereas actually, it had the opposite effect. And I
Well,
think
there's
that's
the
what,
distance, Pete. There's the distance between club and fan.
yeah,
Right
yeah,
there in a nutshell is like, oh, yeah, I mean, how naive have they got to be to think that, well, if we go and get anybody here who we can sort of hide behind and say that they agree with what we say, they're people who advocate what we do as the owners of the club, as the people who are trying to do something at the football club. You know, how naive do they think we all are to say, oh yeah, that's right. Then if he says that, and I go as far as saying any Everton legend, um, any player in like you say, talk about generations, any player the most recent generations for kids who they look up to as Everton players, if they went as far as, you know, standing in line with the way the club is treated, there will be an outrage from everybody about that. That's how far it's gone now.
yeah, 100%. And as I say, I think that is the reason why, you know, there was like that sort of 2-week period where there seemed to be sort of one thing after another being leaked, not officially, but just being leaked from the club. And I think it was the
Shows you how
reactions.
inefficient that is as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But again, they couldn't even do a proper hatchet job. You know, they couldn't even get their leaks right. Typical of Everton to completely mess up their own PR campaign. And it was, but as I say, it's no coincidence to me that I think that Graham Sharp's, the reaction to Graham Sharp's press release or interview that he did was probably the last thing that we've heard, other than Farhad Moshiri's really strange replies to some of the fan advisory board questions, which included the fact that he reiterated the fact that Bill Kenwright is basically the biggest Evertonian around, and that he is the most experienced Premier League chairman and revered and respected in the world of football. Which, I'll be honest, Bill probably wrote that himself.
Yeah, I mean, as well, just the last thing to mention here, because I just want your predictions for the next relegation game we've got against Brentford coming up this weekend. Who one of the best informed sides in the Premier League right now. But that what you've mentioned there, I think you look at other legends of the club, i.e. Peter Reid. You know, you look at what Alan Stubbs was saying about him at the time, which is very, very passionately against what's going on at the board. Big Nev as well. I mean, it's not unknown about like his stance, and like the club previously not let him into certain things, not let him be involved in the legendary side of what the club should be doing with people who are able to do tours and all that sort of thing, stuff that they should be involved in. That gives you even more evidence of who comes out looking, you know, in a poor fashion. Like you said there about Graham Sharp and everybody else associated with the board. I mean, it's getting less and less, isn't it? I mean, I obviously don't speak for people, but I would imagine there's a high percentage of former Everton players who wouldn't have anything to do with doing that with the board. And I think that's seen because you have no doubt that people like that would have been asked, you know, like just to try and get people in favour, like we've said there, because of how thick that we all are as fans. Anyway, got off a bit of a tangent there, lads, because I only wanted to talk about Brentford this weekend. But Pete, I'll come back to you. Sorry, Si, I'll come back to you first, mate. Simple question, really, mate. How are we going to get on against Brentford?
Simple question, but not a simple answer. Obviously, I think you said off air before, Dave, that they've got, you know, a championship form at the moment.
Yeah, 12 games unbeaten in the Premier League, which is I can't believe this actually. And I was talking about this last night, and I think it's gone understated, but just 4 losses in 25 games in the Premier League. Just your second season
incredible
in the league. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's incredible. It could play into our hands. It could not. It just depends. I don't know. We need to look at our home games and be capitalising as much as possible. You need to be making, you know, Goodison a fortress again. That's, you know, that would be Dyche's aim coming in. You know, coming into a relegation dogfight. Obviously, with disappointing results against Villa at home last, and he'll be looking to put that to bed. So I don't know. You know, Brentford could be riding high, but and maybe a bit complacent. But you know, everything that we've seen from them this season shows that they're not actually. But if we win, it'll be a tight 1-0 victory. it's either going to be a nervous tight 1-0 victory, or another 2 or 3-0 drubbing, so to speak. But it's really tight, and I said before about the next 6 games that we've got. I think we've got the best opportunity to string together some good results. Out of the the 4 of us that are down there. So it could start at Brentford, pick up a point.
Yeah.
We've got, I think after that we've got Chelsea, who are anyone's guess. Really, they're not the feared sort of team that you from the last couple of years that they're open to get points taken off them left, right, and centre. So, let's just get into a position where we're going into the next couple of games with our heads held high and as much momentum as we can, and that I think that's the most important thing. So I'm hoping obviously for a victory. I'll take a draw against a really, really informed team. The worst case scenario, obviously, the last thing we need is a heavy defeat.
Yeah. Pete, quick one.
Just to to mirror what Si said there, it's kind of a bit of a must not lose game, because these home games are so important to us. But yeah, I'm still quietly confident to know that I shouldn't be, because of Brentford's incredible form and the fact that and ours is not so incredible. But I do think that we do seem to have turned a bit of a corner with Sean Dyche in terms of being able to actually create chances. It's just a case of being able to take those chances now. I'm hoping that the Brentford do underestimate us. Still can't figure out how and why Ivan Toney is still able to play football, by the way, considering he's admitted to like 200 odd charges of actually of breaching FA rules regarding betting.
I think he'll have a way win on his betting slip this weekend, though.
Yeah, absolutely. He'll be tripling down on himself now. But yeah, it's a weird one. That I mean, I would have assumed that as soon as he'd admitted to charges, which would immediately initiate a ban, I would have thought that he'd be banned. But what do I know? But anyway, but yeah, weirdly, confidence in a weird kind of way. I'm hoping that we can just make Goodison an absolute bear pit, and come away with the 3 points.
Well, a little bit more positive from you two lads anyway, because do you know what, for me, not surprisingly anyway, but I think there's going to be a really difficult game against, like I said, one of the top sides in the Premier League in terms of form. And the other thing as well, I just desperately want us to keep it in our own hands, which it still just about is, given how many games you've got left. It's when you start having to rely on other teams losing games, which I started to do last weekend. And like I said before, petrified of Bournemouth going 2-0 up, but Arsenal this is a favour in the end. A few days after battering us at home as well. So remains to be seen. I think we'll get a result. That's all I'm going to say. I don't think we'll lose. So hopefully that's not the kiss of death. Anyway, boys, thanks so much for joining me for what has been a bumper edition of Subs Weekly on the Blue Room, and been great chatting to you. And no doubt we'll talk quickly once again. Up the toffees, and let's hope we get a result against Brentford this weekend.